Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the Emily Wilde series by Heather Fawcett and a should you read this series. I feel like my lighting is a little bit off, but we're just going to deal with it. I have talked about this series quite a lot on my channel. I have raved about this series because if the short answer to should you read this is most definitely yes. I have been reading this series since it was released. I actually do have a review up of this first book, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I did alongside another January release from 2023, so I can link that. But now I want to talk about the series as a whole and my thoughts and feelings on the whole series and whether you should read this, because although I love it, I absolutely have adored this series, I don't think it's going to be for everybody. It has worked perfectly for me, but it might not work for you. So, should you read this? I thought I would start off, I think, in a normal place by describing the plot of the first book. Some of these things are slight repeats of what I said in that video a couple of years ago, but to give an overview of the plot, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies is our introduction to Emily, who is in academia and she is researching fairies because it is set in our world, but fairies exist, and she's a researcher at Cambridge, and at the beginning of the book she embarks on a research expedition to a remote Nordic island, and whilst there she's there to investigate the fairies and for her encyclopedia. So she's very academia focused, she's very studious, she doesn't have much person skills, she's not the most sociable, she likes to keep to herself and isn't the best at interacting with the local village people because she's just so preoccupied about finding out more about the fairies. But in her time there, she's joined by her academic rival, Wendell Bamblebee, who is quite charismatic and charming and does end up managing to befriend all of the locals there. And it is seeing their quirky dynamic as they banter and potentially grow more romantic as the book and the series goes on. And so these two are investigating what's going on with the local Fae population on this island and how the Fae interact with the local people. I really like the character in this, so Emily and Wendell and their dynamic, also some of the side characters that we get introduced throughout the series, but predominantly the focus is Emily and Wendell and their relationship dynamic. I think that their personalities juxtapose each other really nicely, that Emily is very studious, she's very serious, she's so focused on her academia, and that comes through across all of the books. And Wendell is just so laid back and quite charming and annoyingly good at everything. And I think as well that Heather Fawcett does a really good job with the settings within each of these books. So this one's on this remote Nordic island. It feels very wintry, it feels cold. They have this cabin which becomes a very cozy atmosphere, so she's very good at creating these atmospheres. And then into the other two books, the sequel is set in Austria, so in that mountainous environment, again a slightly colder setting, and then the third book is mostly focused in Ireland and that more leafy autumnal setting. So it's interesting to see all these different settings and the way that they are threaded through the story. So I do want to sort of specify that I think this series does get classed a little bit in with the cozy fantasy series that have come out, and I don't know how I feel about that classification, because cozy fantasy is not something that really interests me. I guess I'm not exactly an expert in saying that this is not or this is cozy fantasy, because I haven't really read much from the genre because it doesn't interest me. Yeah, a lot of people have raved about other cozy fantasy works, but I don't gravitate towards them. And yes, there are cozier elements in these, but I think this is more of a light academia that has a very strong academic focus. There's elements of Fae in there, whether they're good or bad, but that sort of looking at and the study of Fae and fairies. And there is a plot in this. There are stakes that run through these books, that there is definitely a element of, is everyone going to end up okay? And I think it doesn't have that same grimness of an epic fantasy where you sort of have this, someone might die. I don't think I really thought that people were going to die in these, but there is a plot and there is definitely stakes that go into this and threats that happen, that it is not just people having a cozy happy time. Maybe I guess if you're thinking about cozies that I have read The House in the Cerulean Sea, and it has a much more, there is a lot more plot in this than in that. That personally didn't work for me because I was just like, yeah, these characters are nice, but I need a bit more action. And this brings that. And also, I would say that you can read this first book and enjoy it as a standalone, that the ending of this one is sort of very much a happy for now, that you can read it, you can be satisfied, you can be like, okay, I enjoyed this, but I don't feel the need to continue. Or you can keep going, like I did, because I loved it so much, and read books 2 and 3. And I will say, if you didn't like book 1, you're not going to like 2 and 3 because they do just continue on in the same vein. That if you don't connect with Emily and you don't like her as a character, that's not going to change. That they really are a continuation from each other, from the one before. And I could have just continued on having more and more books in this series. This could have been so much longer than a trilogy for me. Like, I could have kept reading this because I was just enjoying seeing this world, seeing these characters, seeing the exploration of the Fae, seeing Emily study them, and seeing the relationship dynamics and exploring all of that. Like, I could have had more. I could definitely have more in this world. Although the third book definitely wraps up in a satisfying way. I'm satisfied with the way this ended. I could just still continue having more, but it is a satisfying ending and conclusion to this series and for these characters. So those would be my overall thoughts of the series. I really enjoyed the whole lot. I do think the first book is my favourite. I have some, I don't know, the first book really stuck with me. I found it so engaging and bingeable. I just could not put this book down, and it was right book, right time. It just really worked. It is definitely my favourite of the 3. Although books 2 and 3, I think my enjoyment is relatively similar. I loved them both. It's just, I have a personal preference. In terms of if you're wanting strengths and weaknesses, my strength, I just loved everything about it. Everything. Weakness is nothing. But if I was thinking about this critically, I think Emily might not work for everybody. She's very academia focused, I've mentioned that. She isn't the most likeable, potentially because of how academia centered that she is and how anti-social that she is, that she's so focused on one thing and can be a little bit, I don't know, blunt and a little bit, she potentially isn't the nicest person to follow. I enjoyed reading from her. I liked reading from her as a character, but just thinking about what some people might feel like, that she is potentially not the most likeable of main characters. It also is a bit whimsical. You just sort of have to, the fairies and the fae, it's not like there's a concrete magic system. There is not a concrete magic system in this. If that is something that you acquire, then you might not like these. That you do have to sort of just suspend your disbelief a little bit. It is folktale, sort of fairy tale elements-esque, and that whimsical sort of fluid nature of the magic. So if that is not for you, then potentially this won't work. As I know some people, the magic system has to be really ironed out. It has to be very much like a Brandon Sanderson magic system where it's all very scientific. That is not this. I think it can really just depend on your taste as well. Like, if your taste in fantasy is for only epic fantasy, grim dark battles, then this is not going to be for you, because it is not battle centric. It isn't. Although I said that there are stakes, it is not battle centric. It is not a John Gwynne. You can love both. You can have different facets to your reading tastes, and that's absolutely fine. But this is not that. It is definitely cozier than that, although I don't think it strays quite into the cozy fantasy side of things. So those would be my summary thoughts of this. I think if you would like a comparison, I'd say this has a lot of similarities to Howl's Moving Castle in terms of the vibe that I get from this, that it has a romantic element to it, it has a fantastical element to it, it has that sort of quite whimsical element. So that would be my comparison. Potentially more so the film of Howl's Moving Castle, because I feel as though I know that better than the book. I've read it and I've watched it, but I've watched it more. I really like that film, or that adaptation. So along those lines. So those would be my thoughts on should you read Emily Wilde, book 1 or the whole series. I've loved this. If you haven't guessed already, I think these were all sort of 5 stars for me. Absolutely enjoyed it. It stuck the landing, and I'm definitely interested in seeing what else Heather Fawcett might put out in the future. Let me know if you have read this series, if you're interested in picking it up. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!